Hey guys, today Michelle and I are going to make a video on building your goal statement. We talked a little bit about that in some of the past videos. However, we didn't go into a lot of detail about it. And so today we want to unpack it a little bit and give you guys a better sense of what this statement looks like, or this one pager that we've created, and how it's played an important role in all the decisions that we've made, both for the last 10 years to not buy land, to getting to this point now where we actually were really comfortable with the property that we found, and now going into property design and implementation. This is going to play a really important role in helping us to make solid decisions, both decisions that we don't regret, hopefully, but also giving us the tools to be able to make decisions rapidly. In the past, before we had this tool, we would spend hours and weeks and sometimes months making decisions about simple things, because we didn't have a process to be able to relate whether or not buying that thing or acting in that way, or making a specific decision toward or away from a specific action was going to actually lead us towards where we wanted to go. And so why don't you talk a little bit about this statement? And I mean, you've done a lot of teaching on this, and we've refined it over the years, but yeah.
So as we've inferred in earlier videos, there's 5 steps to the design process. And the first one is
Clarify.
And really what clarification is all about is getting really, really clear on your values and visions. And when I say you, it's really about the combined decision makers, because every context is different, and there might be one decision maker, there might be 2 or more, depending on the system that it is you're trying to manage.
And actually drawing in a little bit on that point, a lot of times when we're consulting, that's one of the biggest hurdles that we have to overcome, is getting the 2, usually there's 2, husband and wife, decision makers on the same page, because they're not necessarily speaking the same language, which is funny because we kind of joke about being marriage counselors sometimes as we work through this process.
And we see a lot, we're all guilty of this, having an idea of a specific thing that we want in our life. And what I mean, just an example that's jumping to mind, might meet somebody who says, I really want an earth ship. Right, and that they or we culturally just tend to think that we want these things, and we start trying to make decisions to get these things without properly taking the time to evaluate like the fundamental value or the fundamental vision. What is it that thing is going to provide for us, and what we really want? Because often, sometimes, maybe sometimes is a better word. Sometimes, given the resources that you have available to you, or the capital that you have available to you, there's better ways or better things to achieve that fundamental value, or what you fundamentally have as a vision. So that's why we really need to get clear first, clarify. Yeah,
so how do we get started?
Quite a few years back, we were heavily influenced by Alan Savory's work with his holistic management framework. And if you've come to some of our workshops in the past, you've heard me teach holistic management as it was taught to me through HMI International or through the Savory Institute. But in the last few years, one thing we noticed is that it still seemed possibly too complicated, and that it was preventing people from getting started, right? There was too many parts of the context, and folks were getting tripped up on maybe even trivial things, but it prevented them from getting the most important thing done, which was just getting something down on paper. And combined with the work done by the folks behind the 8 Forms of Capital. Who's that, Rob?
Ethan Rowland and Gregory Landau.
Yeah.
So they actually wrote a book on this, and we'll put a link to their website in the show notes below. Highly recommend taking the 10 minutes to read this page that I'm going to link to. If you haven't already seen it yet, you're going to have some big insights when you read this. It's really great work.
Yeah, we thought that was excellent, and had started combining those two frameworks, the holistic management framework and the 8 forms of capital. Also, work from other colleagues, heavily influenced all this. None of this is exclusively our ideas, but I'm just trying to give you an idea of how this evolved. We've now gotten to a point where we really love stating our values and our vision in terms of what our 8 forms of capital will look like at the end of our life, or when we've achieved our values and vision, right?
And that's really important. You made a couple of points there. So capital is what we use to get what we want. But the piece that the 8 forms of capital does is it really allows us to look at capital through a different lens. So most of us focus on just financial gain because so much of our world, or so much of what we buy in this world, comes through the exchange of cash, money, or credit. And so what Ethan, Roland, and Gregory did was that they said, well, actually, there's more than just one form of capital. And if you're not creating a holistic balance sheet, you're not really properly valuing all the different resources that you have in your life. And one of the reasons that this is really important for Michelle and I is that we both left oil and gas jobs, which were heavily remunerated financially. We left the oil and gas industry to pursue Verge permaculture and adaptive habitat. And in doing so, we opted to take more risk, and it was very hard to replace 2 professional engineering oil and gas jobs. However, I have often said that for every dollar we have in the bank, we have 100 in relationships. And so that kind of gets to the essence of what this 8 forms of capital is. So there's financial capital, there's social capital, there's material capital. Those are the things that you own. So living capital, which is kind of the living things in your system, as well as your own life energy. Intellectual capital, so these are the intellectual things that you own, intellectual property, things like that. Experiential capital, which are the experiences that you have, but also the experience that you've gained over the years. Spiritual capital, which is kind of why you get up in the morning and what drives you, essentially. And cultural capital, which is a form of capital that you share amongst your community. So you can't own cultural capital on your own. It's a collectively owned form of capital, in a sense. And you're going to get a sense of that when you take a look at our statements with regards to what they mean. And ultimately, after you've read the 8 Forms of Capital website and you look at our values and vision statement, you will get that sense. But what we're going to encourage you to do is to own those words. And so you might slot certain things into different categories depending on how you interpret those words, which is okay.
So, part of the process, you're definitely going to want to do an inventory. No different than a company, or might have a really good understanding of their financial assets. We would have created an inventory, a snapshot in time of what our different what the different resources and capital that we had access to, split up by these different forms of capital. But the visioning part of the exercise was about describing those 8 forms of capital at the end of our life.
Yeah.
And if we achieved what we'd set out to do in this, how many hours do we have on this planet?
600,000
600,000 hours. This is what we have, and we want to make the most out of it. So
let's just back up. So first of all, what Michelle said is you're basically creating a balance sheet of all of your 8 forms of capital. That's your inventory. That's what you have today. And then you're creating a future inventory, if you will, which is your vision, where you want to end up at the end of your life. And then as opportunities or decisions come forward towards you, then we have a process to help you make decisions to determine whether or not those decisions are actually going to enhance one of the 8 forms of capital towards where you want it to be at the end of your life. And that's the whole process, like in a really simplistic form.
Let's show you our value and vision sheet so you can get a better understanding, a more concrete understanding of what we're talking about. So here it is. Values and vision for Rob and Michelle Avis. The first one is financial capital. And our statement, you'll notice, is we have a diverse surplus of financial capital and ongoing reliable income generation that is aligned with our values and vision. One thing you'll notice is this is stated in the positive, as if it already exists that way. And we're being very intentional about describing what that asset both looks like and in a way how we're interacting with it, or how it's interacting in a way that meets our values and visions is maybe more correct. So not only do we have we were very specific about a diverse surplus of financial capital, and that means lots of different things, but we don't want all of our money in one bank account, or all of our financial assets in one form either, right?
Or all of our income coming in one place.
Yeah. But we also recognize that in order to meet our values, that income generation needs to be aligned with our values.
Yep, absolutely.
So that's it. Social capital. Why don't you read that one?
So our family relationships are loving and meaningful. We have supportive and strong, dependable relationships and live in a diverse, thriving, and economically stable community. Lots there. We have children that are self-motivated, mature beings that value their self-worth and are mindful of the feelings, rights, and human dignity of others. And we are deliberate, mindful, focused, honest, and ethical. We communicate compassionately and collaboratively and have a family environment based upon empathy, choice, and equality.
Okay. There's a lot there. I think this really represents how important our social capital is to us and how much we value the quality of life that we get based on our social capital. There's a couple things we were describing, both, our external relationships, but in that description we had to describe ourselves and how we have to be in order for those relationships to be that way. So there's some couple of hints of the kind of things we were thinking about. There's some statements about us. We're deliberate, mindful, focused, honest, and ethical. And as well, communication we identified as a key skill, or something that we would have to be able to do compassionately and collaboratively in order to have really strong social capital.
Yeah, and I think the reason that we really emphasize the social capital piece is that resilience and anti-fragility is really important to us. And I think that to be resilient or anti-fragile, you have got to have really solid relationships around you. Mm-hmm. I think if we go back up.
And I say we can't thrive if our community's not thriving.
Right.
So we wanted to state that, like how we envision the future, our community has to thrive.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think just to bring this back up to 30,000 feet again, like a lot of these statements buttress our worldview as well. So what we think is coming down the pipeline, one of the ways that you can insure yourself against these issues that we may or may not face, we don't know. They're probabilities at this point, whether it's peak oil or climate change or any of the kind of elephants in the room, so to speak. When we're looking at these, we're not only looking at how to make our life better, but we're also looking at how to insure ourselves against things that we're concerned about, and making sure that we're making decisions towards a better world. So it's not about running away from the bad. It's about building a deliberate life that actually improves the future as well.
Yeah, and the irony is that not only do our values increase our resiliency, they actually build a beautiful life for us.
And hopefully a better world.
Yeah, and a better world. So we don't, even though it's not all driven by fear.
No, it's not driven by fear at all.
Driven by this quality of life that we want to live.
It's the same reason that you buy life insurance or critical illness insurance, is you start making decisions towards these things. Okay. Absolutely.
Material capital is the next one. Our statement is our material possessions enhance our well-being and improve our quality of life while ensuring our sustainability, security, and safety. So you're seeing there's some elements of our values embedded in there in terms of how the things we own or have access to support our values. And I should say that when we're painting or when we're describing the 8 forms of capital and how they'll look far into the future, that doesn't necessarily mean that we own all these things either. That just means these are the things we have access to be able to achieve the goals, or the things that we're trying to achieve. Mm-hmm. So I even see an improvement on this is that our material possessions and the possessions we utilize, right?
Right.
Resources and energy come from renewable or sustainable sources, and we have very little to no dependency on non-renewable sources. Important systems and services are redundant or anti-fragile.
Absolutely. Living capital, we live in a serene environment close to and connected to nature. We have access to nutrient-dense food, clean air, and clean water. And surrounding ecosystems are rich in biodiversity and have effective water and mineral cycles. We are also in excellent health.
Intellectual capital. So when we had to think about describing what the intellectual capital would look like at the end of our life, we wrote down that meaningful information is abundant, accessible, and collaborative. Our ideas and intellectual property are shared and distributed and contribute to making the world a better place.
Experiential capital. So we've achieved proficiency or mastery of skills in areas that support our values and lifestyle and offer apprenticeship to others. So again, showing that we want to build that community thing again. That apprenticeship was really important. There's no point having all these skills if you can't help other people to achieve the same thing. And that's really important in our quality of life.
And you'll see intellectual capital is this idea of knowledge and ideas, and experiential capital is really this embodied wisdom or practical skills, right?
Yeah.
Spiritual capital. So we wrote that we are confident, peaceful, and in a balanced mental state. We have freedom to self-direct our time, pursue our passions to their fullest potential, and lead a fun, happy, and adventurous life. I'd say this one, it's going to be really dependent on you and your particular context in terms of what drives you and how you define your spiritual capital. Ours really reflects the meditation practice that we found really beneficial in our life, and this idea of having freedom to self-direct our time and be happy and adventurous. Yeah.
And the acceptance of impermanence and that things are always changing, and when you get too attached to things, that's really when suffering comes. So learning to kind of be at ease with the way things are, it's kind of what
drive how we define our spiritual capital.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Lastly, cultural capital. So this was actually kind of a hard one for us. We didn't really. It has been a hard one for us to define because I think. Probably more me than you. I think you have more cultural capital than I've ever had. Considering you grew up at the lake and you have a whole bunch of traditions that you guys with potlucks and curling bonspiels and all of these things that there's not much of a curling bonspiel if you are just out there by yourself. Kind of requires a community to participate. But as we've kind of taken this permaculture route, one of the first things that we did was build or co-build the Permaculture Calgary Guild, which is a not-for-profit in Calgary that aims at creating these traditions and rituals around the concept of earth care, people care, and future care. And so all of us have these. Some people might have more than others. But again, cultural capital, for me anyways, reinforces the social piece, which, as we said earlier, is really important.
Yeah, our statement that we came up with, as it is right now, is that our family and community rituals, traditions, art forms, and social patterns inspire us, create beauty, and celebrate the shared values, earth care, people care, and future care. And for me, an example, a relevant, recent example of this is that, we just had Christmas with our family, and it's a tradition, it's a long tradition that my family has celebrated, and Rob too, that we both grew up with. And as we are forming our own rituals and traditions with our own children, and we were reflecting on this statement of cultural capital, I'm trying to find ways to take this family tradition that's always been really important to us, but infuse it with more of these values that are really important to us. And there's a lot of ways that Christmas, the way it is currently celebrated, does not reflect earth care, people care, and future care. And I've been thinking a lot about that and how things I want to change for next year. Yeah. So in a nutshell, that's the values and vision document we have in this snapshot of time. Today, January 4th, 2020. This is a living document though, right? And it has evolved.
This is probably our 4th or 5th draft.
It's probably, yeah. And it does evolve and it does change. The important thing is getting something down. And the process of making decisions when you reflect on your value and vision one-pager will help you to get it clear and get it good and get it better. And because things are always changing, the only constant has changed. New information is coming into your system, new people are coming in, new opportunities, that the reality is your visions and values do change, and that's okay. It's just important to record them and get really clear on them, whether you're one person or whether you're a team, right?
So just a couple of observations over the years. One is that each of these words will mean something different to you than they do to us. Some of them might seem really vague to you. It's because you didn't come up with a statement. However, if you read these enough times, our document specifically, what you're going to find is that you'll find meaning in those words in your own sense. And over the course of all of the different people that I've helped in our consultancy, the thing that comes back over and over again, regardless of what their religious belief is, regardless of how old their kids are, where they live in the world, we all want the same thing. We all want to live in a healthy, sustainable way. We want our kids to go to school. We want them to grow up and not have disease. These are all fundamental beliefs that we've got, but what we end up finding is because the world is so capital centric, financial centric,
and complex.
We tend to always make decisions around one or two facets, which is usually money, and at the expense of all of the other kind of areas in our life. Mm-hmm. So we've got a tool to help you guys build this. We're going to leave a link to our tool that lives in Google Earth Pro in the show notes below, so you can start on this. This is the first step in our 5-step process. So clarify your values and vision, diagnose your properties for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, design the property of your dream, implement the property, and figure out what your weakest link is so that you can knock off the projects that are most important and are going to have the biggest impact on your life first, as opposed to just doing it willy-nilly. And then monitor and manage for success. That's the 5 steps right there. You cannot succeed at the other 4 unless you do this. We've done this enough times to feel confidence in that statement. So make sure if you're interested in this, you download that tool, get Google Earth Pro, both of which are free, and start working on it. And feel free to take any of the statements off of our one-pager that fit with your context. You can use it as a starting place and massage it until it fits within what's important to you. Mm-hmm. So hopefully you found that useful, guys. We're gonna keep making videos on this stuff. We're gonna slowly work our way through the 5 steps. Might take a while because there's lots and lots of stuff to talk about. There's tons happening here at the homestead over the next little while. We're gonna be jumping a little bit ahead at some point here to do a bit of diagnosis work because man, this house is cold. So keep an eye on some of those videos. And you'll see how we go about starting to understand where the weak links in this house are, because we're going to be doing a deep energy retrofit. If you found this useful, give us a share. And we really want to grow the channel around this idea this coming year in 2020. And so it's really helpful when you guys share it with other people that are on the same path, and to give us a like if you found it useful. So thanks so much, guys. We'll see you guys in the next video.